All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming out. I'm super excited to introduce my mentor. For my wife and I, we always thought about owning a business. We had always had this idea. Really, Christina did. Let's be honest. Let's just be honest. It was really my wife that really wanted to have a business, and so at one point we started thinking about this idea of a magazine, this whole concept, and then we literally did a search and we found Luxury Home Magazine. We found a number and I called this guy Brad, and for the next 3 months, for literally an hour and a half, probably every couple of days, Brad would talk to me and was just telling me about how we could be successful as entrepreneurs and business owners. And so I got to read this because Brad, he asked me to write the foreword of his book. And I was just like, whoa, like, okay.
No, that's not how it went.
That's not how it went?
No, it went that if I ever write a book, can I write the foreword?
Did I say that?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
No, because I was sarcastic and I was joking with you and I said, oh, someday I'm going to write a book. So you said, probably sarcastically,
yeah,
if I ever write a book, can I write the foreword? And so one day I called Tomas and I said, would you like to write the foreword of my book? And he said, I don't remember what you said.
Yeah, I didn't know what to say at that point.
I
was like, so this is what I wrote in the foreword, because really this is probably the best way to describe Brad. Brad Taylor is passion. I remember talking with Brad about my new business venture like it was yesterday. He was so passionate, you could feel every word he spoke through the phone. I loved talking with Brad. He is a mentor, friend, and a person I truly look up to. Passion, AKA I pass on, is just what he did for my family and me. When Brad and I met, I was a teacher. I loved teaching, but I knew there were other things that I could do. Being an entrepreneur was not one of them, or so I thought. It didn't take long for me to begin to see the world through Brad's eyes. He has the ability to transfer passion to others, and I'm confident that you will feel his passion as you read this book and learn the 12 intangibles of success. I know the foreword is not usually a place to thank the author, but I'm not going to go the usual route. Brad, thank you. Thank you for changing my life and helping me find my passion. My family and I are forever changed because of you and your amazing wife, Kathy, which he outkicked his coverage with Kathy, just so y'all know. He definitely married up. Thank you for answering my calls at all times of the day and walking me through the entrepreneurial hurdles as I began my business over 7 years ago. I remember calling you when my first magazine was printed. I sat in my garage in tears, thinking about all the hard work I put in. I was filled with joy and awe. Thank you for helping me understand the importance of passion and how it brings joy to others as well as myself. It is an honor to work with you, Brad, but the greatest honor I can say is knowing you are a friend and a mentor. Thank you. Appreciate it, my man.
Well, these two, come over here. These two are just awesome. I mean, you cannot not love them. So, what prompted us to write this book? It's really, over the last 25 years, as my wife and I have been, working together, which is really tough for a lot of couples to do, and there isn't a month that goes by that a couple doesn't contact us from some business and say, how do you work together? We saw a video you did. We're watching what you guys do. And it's tough. But it starts with having mutual respect. If my wife was here, she would kind of talk a little bit about how we work together. But what prompted me to write the book was early on, we made a lot of mistakes. And we learned from those mistakes. And when you make mistakes, you better yourself, you humble yourself, and you learn learn never to make those mistakes again. So here's the deal. 27 years ago, I was sitting with my father-in-law in a family-friendly restaurant, and I decided to acquire the rights to open a magazine, similar to Tomas. So we shared with my father-in-law and mother-in-law everything that we were going to do. And I didn't even get 2 minutes out of the conversation because my father-in-law stood up and he said, "You're going to fail and you're going to be back in 6 months. I can't believe you're moving across the United States." Well, I was living in Sarasota, Florida, so I moved 3,200 miles, 3,150 miles to Portland, Oregon. So when my wife and I heard my father-in-law screaming, using words I can't even repeat, I took my wife's hand, we went into the car, and we said, "I guess we're on our own." So part of my motivation at the time was to prove to my father-in-law that he was wrong. I did that. And since then, we've become best of friends. Tomas and Christina were on the cruise we recently took, and they saw my father and mother-in-law. My mother-in-law said at the time, though, after I interviewed her for the book, that she was mortified by the way my father-in-law had spoke. Putting that aside, these 12 intangibles that I put in here were my blueprint. That was my success. This is truly, I can tell you unequivocally, that made me successful. And I'm not going to read every one. It starts with faith and it ends with balance, balancing your life. But I'll tell you a few things. If you don't believe in what you're doing, if you don't have passion in what you're doing, and you don't have confidence in what you're doing, it's going to be really tough to be successful in anything you do in life. And everybody in this room has a dream. Everybody in this room has a goal to achieve. And, there's too many people today, they go to their grave wishing they could accomplish something that they had in the back of their mind to achieve. And don't ever let anyone tell you you can't do something, because you can. There's always those naysayers. There's always those little voices in your head when you're potentially prospecting somebody to become a client, when you're thinking of making a cold call, when you're thinking of whatever it may be. Because if you think you can do it, you can do it. So don't believe in yourself, believe in what you're doing, have passion in what you're doing, and you're going to be extremely successful. And so this book really talks about my journey. It talks about struggles and adversities that my wife and I faced early on. And if there's someone thinking of starting a business on their own, there's a whole chapter on what to do and what not to do, because we learn from our mistakes. And those mistakes made us successful today. With that said, I appreciate everyone for coming. I really do. I'm honored that you guys took some time. Anybody has any questions, feel free to ask me. I'm here for you. And I just really appreciate Tomas and Christina. And Tomas, your foreword means everything to me. And I appreciate our friendship. And this guy and his wife are I just love them to death. I really do. So that's it.
What was the hardest part of writing the book?
Well, to be honest with you, I wrote the book on, it took me about 3 years of writing stuff down on the cruise ship. So every winter, we would take a 2-week cruise, because that's the slow season for us. It's a slow season for real estate. And so I would go into a little corner and make notes. And I would make notes and start to type stuff out based on the adversities and challenges I had, so that other people don't make those same. And my attitude is, if you read this book and you can take one thing and implement it in your career, whatever your career may be, it was worth the time reading the book. Because, people today sometimes don't like to be told or criticized. Criticism is not a bad thing. You learn from criticism. Everybody is always learning regardless of the age they're at. I mean, I'm 62 years old. I'm still learning every day. And my daughter really inspires me because her dream a year ago was to be a YouTuber. So the first year she hit 1,000 people following her. So this year her dream is to hit 10,000. So in a matter of 2 months she's already at, I don't know, 1,800 or whatever. Gabe, would you look it up? Yeah. So 1,900. And I'm really inspired by Tomas. Now he doesn't really realize how he inspires me, but he motivates me to continue to do things that take me out of my comfort zone. Because everybody has to stretch themselves to get out of their comfort zone. And in the real estate industry, you guys know, you got to really push yourself out of the comfort zone. But at the end of the day, that's what makes you a better person. So I don't know if I answered that question. What hardest part was from the time I was really skeptical. So I submitted my manuscript. Now I'm really close with a person who's a mentor of mine who has written like 9 books. He's a Hall of Fame speaker. He speaks all over the world. He hosts Motivational Mondays on the Tennis Channel, and I meet with him pretty often, and I showed him my manuscript, and I said, "What do you think?" And he says, "Well, I think you ought to at least send it to the guy that I'm using," and it was a publishing house in Seattle. So I sent him just the first chapter. Well, he immediately responded back, and he said, "All right, I'm ready to do something. I'm very inspired by your first chapter. The problem is when they sent the book back, the manuscript back to me the first time, there was like 3,000 changes to be made." And even today, if I was to write this again, I would have done it differently knowing what I know now, and I would have written a book just on the 12 intangibles, and each chapter would have been an intangible. But I tried to cram a lot of stuff because this was just an item. Everybody has a dream. It doesn't make any difference what your dreams or goals are. It could be, running the marathon. It could be learning how to ski. It could be whatever. So one of my things on the bucket list was to write a book. So I checked it off. Now I'm thinking of another one to write just because it's really bothering me that I could do it pretty quickly. So, you never know what happens in your life. So anyway, any other questions?
Yes. You said everyone has a dream. So what was your initial dream when you thought about opening up your magazine and starting?
That's a great question. So here's the deal. When I moved to Florida, it wasn't for Luxury Home Magazine. It was, I bought a franchise, and within 3.5 years, I opened 14 magazines. Then in another 2 years, I opened 2 other magazines non-related to real estate. So after a period of time, my wife and I had this thought that we ought to go after the luxury market. So one day a magazine came in the mail, and it was something similar to Luxury Home Magazine, but it wasn't called Luxury Home Magazine. So I bought that magazine, and I converted it to Luxury Home Magazine, made it coffee table size, and then my goal was to make Portland, Oregon successful, and I wanted to move out of the rain, because if you know anything about Oregon, it rains like 8 months of the year. It's horrible. So we moved to Sacramento, which was very close, and the climate was awesome because you can, an hour away, you can go skiing. So my goal, my dream was to have 2 magazines and live happily ever after. That was it. The problem is, people started to call us and say, "Hey, I want to open a magazine." I had no intention of ever opening more than 2 magazines. So I was forced to start a company that I had no intention of doing. And every magazine that opened was organically opened, where someone came to us, where they're searching on the internet and they live in this Texas city and they're from San Antonio. In my philosophy in hiring someone, and Tomas knows this, is we date, then we get engaged, and then we get married. Because when I first started dating Tomas and Christina, we were dating, and then we got a little closer, and then we got engaged, and then they came to training, and we got married. And I tell everybody up front, I'm not looking to date you, I'm looking to marry you. And I say this in my book because that's my process of hiring someone, regardless if it's for opening a magazine or somebody that would work for us. Because, you know, my culture, what I believe is that you take care of your people, you be transparent, and you follow those 12 intangibles. Because if you're just beating someone down, that's not having empathy. If you're just beating someone down, that's not making them believe and be successful. And there's a lot of companies that do that today. So now we print 150 million pages a year.
How many magazines?
I don't know. I haven't added them up lately. But other question. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
But everybody in this room has a story. Everybody in this room has a dream. Don't take them to the graveyard. You know, so I posted something on my Instagram. You know, it says like when you're 80 years old and you're sitting in the rocking chair with your wife or your husband, you know, it's better to say, gosh, I'm sure glad we did that, versus, gosh, I wish we would have done that. And it doesn't make any difference what.
What's your Instagram?
TheBradTaylor IS. If you go to my website, which is on the top, you can follow all my social media. I asked somebody to respond to my Instagram the other day, and they didn't make it to the Barnes & Noble signing. And they sent a text to me with a snapshot of my Instagram page. I don't know why they did that. And they said, you sure inspire me to be a better person. Every time I look at your Instagram, you're having another post. Because what I do is every other post is a post of inspiration from somebody out there, whether it's Nike or Michael Jordan or Steve Jobs or whatever it may be. So I tried that. This is my new theory this year versus last year. So it's like a checkerboard. Any other questions?
What's your current dream?
My current dream is just to get out of a state that I pay high state taxes on. And my current dream is to spend more time with my grandkids who live in Florida, because time flies so fast, you know. I want to start spending more time with my grandkids. Amen. Because that's important. It's important to us. Because, you know, you work so hard. I mean, I was telling my daughter who's graduating this year from high school, and I said, can you believe I've been working for 40-some years? That's a long time, you know. But, you know, I've always been an entrepreneur, and you'll see that in the book. I mean, I worked for somebody for 5 or 6 years, but that really created the platform for me to propel being an entrepreneur. And I really believe you're either an entrepreneur or you're not an entrepreneur. And that's okay to be one or the other. Because some of the most successful people out there in the business world are not entrepreneurs, but they support entrepreneurs. And we need those people. But entrepreneurs risk it all to succeed. When I moved to Florida, when I moved from Florida to Oregon, I'm going to tell you, every dime I had was banking that I was going to make it. And if I didn't, I'd be getting a job at Walmart because I had no money left. And, you know, a lot of you in the business world, you know, when you're an entrepreneur, it was really hard for my wife, and I'll shut up. It was really hard for my wife because my wife was a pediatric nurse. And I always joke with her, I said, if you would have stayed in school for another 3 years, you might as well have been a doctor. Because she didn't do just 4 years, she had to continue to specialize in pediatrics. So my wife wasn't even a pediatric nurse for 5 or 6 years. And we made a decision intentionally for her to give up her license and to work with me. And in those days, we didn't have digital photography, so we were literally cutting pictures out and taping them on this big piece of paper and submitting it to our publisher, and that's how we produced 180 pages 13 times a year, because everything was 35 millimeter. You remember, when you first got in photography, you didn't take photos with digital, you had to use 35 millimeter. So, we were using a word processor to type our copy until, but my wife tells the great story of how it was a complete mindset to not only marry somebody who was an entrepreneur, but to become an entrepreneur herself, because that really wasn't in her DNA. But if she did it, anybody can do it. All right, that's it. Thank you all for coming. Yes, yes.
Any point in time within these 3 years where you said, I'm just gonna not doing this, like or quit, or you felt like I'm gonna give up, I'm gonna do something else? And if so, what made you pursue to continue to go?
Okay, well, that's a twofold question. So I was in the retail industry, and I owned a 40,000 square foot drugstore in Florida. And prior to that, I was co-owner of a drugstore in Sarasota, Florida. So my second venture did not work out well because at the time I had a partner and it was not going right. So I kind of pulled a string, had him buy me out, and I lost a lot of money in the retail industry the second time. With that said, when I made the decision to move and across the United States, I say in my book, when you go to tackle something, if you have a plan B, then you're probably not going to succeed. Because if you have a plan B, you've already made up your mind that if plan A doesn't work, plan B, you follow the plan B. And so I talk about this in my book that, when you go to make a decision to do something, don't have a plan B because you're not convinced you can do it. Just like when Tomas and Christina, they put everything on the line to start the magazine. A lot of people don't know that because some people didn't 100% believe in them. But with that said, I think somebody in this room proved them wrong. And with that said, the proof is in the pudding. So, not to pick on anyone in specifics.
We were very skeptical.
Yes, well,
But then very supportive.
but I could relate to a lot of that because my father-in-law, probably didn't use the F word and tell him he was going to fail,
No.
and he would be seeking other employment within 6 months. Now, my father-in-law doesn't really remember the whole conversation.
But Brad reminds him.
But I literally tell this story in front of my father-in-law 200 times a year. But he made me a better person because he forced me to be successful, and I couldn't fail because what am I going to do? Come back to Florida and say, you were right? I mean, I couldn't. Not to pick on you or anything.
What is your recharge?
Oh, recharge means that when I first started, when I moved to Oregon, and I worked 7 days a week. I mean, I literally was up first thing in the morning, and I was the last person to go to bed. And my wife kind of felt sorry for me. I mean, literally, she'd be coming downstairs at like 2 in the morning going, what are you doing? I said, I got to shoot photos on the copy stand because I had to convert every photo to 35 millimeter film. So I guess I think there's a point where you have to have balance in your life. You can't be a workaholic. You got to take time to do whatever you enjoy doing. And we made a decision early on, probably after the first year, we weren't going to work Sundays anymore. Okay, so we stopped working Sundays. And then, I think recharge means get away once in a while. Take a short trip. Take a short cruise. Go to Italy for a week. Whatever it may be. But the thing is, you can't work 7 days a week and be sustainable because you're going to burn yourself out. And that's really what I mean. I kind of talk about that a little bit.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you. Yes?
Yeah. What do you believe are the most important qualities and characteristics of an entrepreneur?
The 12 intangibles of success. I don't know if one's more important than the other. For me, it's all about passion. It's being persistent. It's never giving up. When you have a bad day, stop what you're doing, and tomorrow will be a better day. I was telling somebody the other day, you know, when you're having a bad day, you're calling people, you're not getting the responses you want, shut it off and start back up the next day. Because I'll tell you what, your attitude, your mindset, the way you present yourself, your posture will show in your conversations. So, and everybody has bad days, bad weeks. But plug positive stuff into your head. Listen to motivational. When I was starting up, I was listening to motivational tapes. I love Les Brown. And Les Brown would tell me, Brad, if you don't have a white chalk mark around your body, it's a great day. Because that's the kind of motivation I needed. And everybody, look at, you're shaking your head. But I'm going to tell you, if I didn't listen to speakers like Les Brown in my cassette player in 1994, I wouldn't be standing here. Les Brown inspired me when I was down, and he picked me up when I was doing awesome. He'd give me high fives. And he's just one. But I loved his, you know, that was when he was younger and, you know, really inspirational. Now there's so many people out there. But plug yourself into stuff.
Motivational Monday.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Brad.
I have to put this back over here. Thank you.
I think